Unfortunately, sometimes you can't get there from here. As you are developing a feature, a game, a story, sometimes you can get yourself into a dead end. And the only option you have is to back up, to throw away what you've already done, and to try a different path. For some people, and I would certainly put myself in this group, that's an incredibly difficult thing to do because there's a lot of work in what you've already done. There are bits of features, there are assets that have been worked upon that you feel a visceral need to try to salvage. This can become really paralyzing in cases when you are up against a deadline. If that game is coming out in 3.5 years, it's a lot easier to say, okay, well, this combat system we built isn't working. Let's burn it down and build a new one. If that game is coming out in 2 months, that's a lot harder to do because it feels like you don't have time to do it. And chances are you probably don't. It took you however long it took you to get to where you are right now, to back up, to undo what you've already done and take a different path feels insurmountable when there's only a very short period of time left to go. This is one of the reasons why moving dates in dribs and drabs can be so damaging. If your game ends up being 2 years late, but you know it's going to be 2 years late, that opens up your probability space massively because you know, okay, right, we're not shipping in a month. We're going to ship in 25 months. Then let's take a step back and re-examine what we've got and potentially undo some of the decisions that we made earlier when we thought we were making a different game and take a different path. If instead your game ends up moving 2 years, but it does it 3 months at a time, when does that re-examination occur? You're always 3 months from ship. For 2 years, you're always 3 months from ship. Not only were you not able to take a step back and back up and take a different path, as time goes on, you're digging that debt deeper and deeper and deeper. You are laying Band-Aid on top of Band-Aid on top of Band-Aid. And not only do you not feel like you have the ability to back up because you don't have time, you're actually making it harder and harder to back up because with each extra Band-Aid, with each patch, with each thing you do in order to try to make what you have work, you're making it harder to take a different path. You are adding to that pile of assets that you might have to abandon. You are making it ever more difficult to do what you probably should have done in the first place, which is burn it down and take the other fork in the road. But because you didn't know, because you were always 3 months from ship, because you didn't know, you were forced at each opportunity to take the good enough answer each time because you didn't have time. You didn't have the opportunity to step back and re-examine what you had. Sometimes in those cases, the problems will reach a point where there's no choice, where the burden, the cruft, the amount of friction built into the systems reach a breaking point and it all comes apart and you are forced to back up. But that's not the ideal way to do it. If you're doing it under incredible time pressure, then you can take a different path, but that path is going to be the path of least resistance. You're going to choose more cliched ways of doing storytelling. You are going to take more well-worn design paths. You are going to take the path that's going to get you there as quickly as you can, which may be better than what you had, what you were forced to move away from, but it probably isn't the best solution, which you might have been able to arrive at if you had realized earlier that you actually had the time to back up. Now, I keep saying 2 months before ship, 3 months before ship, but the reality is it's actually a lot more time than that. You have a bunch of fixed time that occurs at the end of the project. And some of it can't be interrupted at all. When you're in cert, you're not doing other things on the project. You're waiting for it to either successfully go through cert or not. When you're in manufacturing, you are waiting for the discs to be stamped out. You can't be injecting new features into the game, or at least not features that are going to appear before the patch comes out. On AAA, this can stretch out into almost a year because you have time for optimization, time for final QA tests, time for your balance passes, time for cert, time for manufacturing. You can have development occurring in some of that time at the end, but to throw away an entire feature, to throw the entire feature into reverse in order to back up, like we're talking about here, can be incredibly dangerous and incredibly disruptive to your development process. I'm certainly guilty of wanting to always move forward, to try to avoid moving backwards, because for me, and I've said this many times, done is the best feature, and something's always got to be the worst thing in your game. So finishing things, setting them aside, and making new things, for me, is almost always the right answer. But there are cases when you have to abandon the thing you've put the work in. You have to back up and go the other way. Now, there are people who have the opposite problem, who have virtually no interest in continuing on the path they're currently on, who love the act of backing up and taking the other path. And those people have, I would argue, an even bigger problem, because if you never finish anything, if you're always backing up and trying to find the better path, you will probably find better paths. But there's probably always a better path to be found. So if you only ever make it halfway down any path, you never finish anything. So for me, that's a much bigger issue. A good enough solution finished is better than a great solution that never reaches the finish line. But sometimes you don't have a good enough solution. Sometimes you have a bad solution covered in band-aids, barely holding itself together. And in that case, the right answer would have been to back up. So as is often the case, the answer is moderation. The answer is to try to move forward, try to finish things, preference finishing things, completing things, getting things to done, over trying other paths, constantly iterating, constantly prototyping, especially once you're out of the prototyping phase. But recognize that sometimes that's the right path. The right path is to throw the thing in reverse, lose everything you've been working on, and find another way forward. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. We also have a Patreon if you're interested in supporting the channel in that way. Both patrons and channel members get access to our Discord, so if you're interested in interacting with the community to a deeper level, that's a great way to do that. How about you? Do you find yourself wanting to try different ways of doing things over and over again and having difficulty bringing things to completion? Or, like me, do you have a tendency to support the current way to a fault, to the point of destruction, to the point of getting stuck with decisions that are no longer accurate, no longer viable, no longer useful? Or have you found a middle path? Have you found the way between these two extremes that works for you? If you have, definitely share what you've done to help yourself do that in the comments. I will see you again soon. Thank you.